The examiner asks you a question. Your mind goes blank. You say, and that single sound just cost you fluency points. But what if you had 10 phrases ready that sound intelligent while your brain catches up? Phrases that examiners actually interpret as thoughtful hesitation rather than language breakdown. Here they are.
Welcome to the IELTS Speaking Podcast, Quick Fix Series. I'm Felicity, and I'm here with Anthony, former IELTS speaking examiner, 10 plus years, thousands of real tests. Quick Fix episodes are short, tactical, and built around one single thing you can fix immediately. Today, filler phrases, and this matters more than most people realize.
Right, so let me explain why this matters from an examiner's perspective. The fluency and coherence criterion, which is one of the 4 scoring criteria, specifically penalizes what the examiners call hesitation. But here's the nuance that most candidates never know. Not all hesitation is equal. And are what examiners call filled pauses. They're flagged as breakdowns, but certain phrases, structured lexical hesitations, are actually interpreted as natural thinking. They don't hurt you. Some of them actively help you.
So the goal is to replace with something that sounds like a real person thinking out loud.
Exactly. Let's go through 10 of them. I'll give you the phrase, I'll show you how it sounds in context, and Felicity will flag what makes each one work. Starting with part 1 phrases, because part 1 is where candidates most often go blank since the questions come fast and you haven't had planning time.
Phrase 1.
That's actually a really interesting question. I'd have to say, the key here is I'd have to say. It's a conditional that buys you a half second while signaling that you're engaging with the question seriously. Examiners hear this and read it as thoughtful, not as struggling.
And it sounds natural. You don't want to say, that's an interesting question in a robotic, obviously memorized way, but said warmly with a slight pause before the answer, it works perfectly.
Phrase 2. Let me think about that for a second, followed by your answer. This is the most honest of the fillers. You're literally announcing that you're thinking, and that's fine. Thinking is not penalized. Running out of language is penalized. These are different things.
Phrase 3.
Off the top of my head, I'd say, this implies spontaneity. You're not reading from a script, you're speaking naturally and not overthinking it. It also slightly lowers the stakes for what comes next. If your answer isn't perfect, you've already framed it as improvised.
That's a clever psychological move, actually.
It is. Phrase 4, and this one's particularly good for part 1 opinion questions. Well, it depends on, followed by the condition. So the examiner asks, do you prefer the city or the countryside? And instead of going blank, you immediately say, well, it depends on, and you finish the thought from there. You've bought 3 seconds and started structuring an answer at the same time.
It depends on is also doing double duty. It's a filler and a band 8 nuancing move. We talked about this in episode 31 on rain. So you're buying time and upgrading your answers simultaneously.
2 for 1. Phrase 5. That's something I've actually thought about before. This is your warmest, most personal sounding filler. It implies the topic genuinely interests you, even if it doesn't, even if you've never considered it in your life. When you say this, the examiner hears enthusiasm and engagement, which is exactly what part 1 is supposed to feel like.
Okay, let's move to part 2 and part 3 fillers because the context is a bit different there.
Right. In part 2, you have your planning minute, so you shouldn't need fillers as often at the start of your answer. But sometimes, mid-long turn, you lose your thread. That's where these come in. Phrase 6. Where do I even start with this one? Said warmly, not desperately. It signals abundance, so much to say I don't know where to begin, rather than blankness.
Phrase 7.
Actually, now that I think about it, this is brilliant mid-answer because it sounds like a genuine realization. You're not stalling, you're discovering something in real time. Examiners love this because it mimics natural speech very convincingly.
Phrase 8.
I suppose the best way to describe it would be, this buys you a full second while your brain assembles a description. And the phrase itself is sophisticated. I suppose hedges. The best way to describe it implies you're selecting from multiple possible framings. It sounds like a thoughtful speaker, not a panicked one.
2 more for part 3 specifically?
Yes, phrase 9. for when the part 3 question is genuinely abstract and you need a moment to find an angle. That's quite a complex question, actually, and I think the answer varies depending on you've bought yourself time and launched into a nuanced frame. The examiner is satisfied you're engaging with the complexity of the question.
And phrase 10?
There's an argument to be made that we covered this in episode 33, but it works as a filler too. When you don't know what your opinion is yet, start with there's an argument to be made that, and let the argument form as you speak. It's incredibly versatile and sounds analytical at any point in the test.
Okay, let's rapid fire the full list back so listeners can write these down or screenshot this section.
1. That's actually a really interesting question. I'd have to say 2. Let me think about that for a second. 3. Off the top of my head, I'd say 4. Well, it depends on 5. That's something I've actually thought about before. 6. Where do I even start with this one? 7. Actually, now that I think about it, 8. I suppose the best way to describe it would be 9. That's quite a complex question, actually, and I think the answer varies depending on 10. There's an argument to be made that
The free resource for this episode, we've put all 10 phrases on a single downloadable card with example sentences for each one. It's designed to be printed and stuck on your wall for the last week before your test. Link in the description below, completely free.
and the word on how to practice these. Don't memorize them as a list. That's useless. Pick 2 or 3 that feel natural to you and practice using them in every single speaking practice session this week. By the time your test arrives, they should feel like your own words. Because in a way, they are. You've just borrowed them from people who speak English naturally.
Quick fix applied. Episode 35 is next. Part 1, Wild Animals. Another topic students panic about for no reason. Anthony's got a Band 8 model answer that I genuinely did not see coming. That's up next.
Subscribe so you don't miss it. We're publishing multiple times a week right now. See you there.